What actually constitutes game design? What steps do you have to go through in order to properly make a game? The first step of the game design process is the concept or the idea that will drive your game. This can either be your fancy new story or your brand new idea for a fun mechanic. Really, I don't have to do much talking about this because if you're watching this video, I'm sure that you've come up with a few concepts in your time and there's nothing else to it. The second stage of development is something called the first playable. The idea here is that instead of relying on your idea, you build a very small scale version of the game to prove that your ideas are worth pursuing. So instead of creating a collectible card game and building in 400 cards, you take 30 cards. You build a tiny little version of the game and you play it. Instead of building a full-blown RPG, you focus on building one little town with one enemy and one party member. Then you can play the game and see if it's worth pursuing. So the next step of development is something that I call revision. The idea is that you start to play test what you have so far, the first playable demo. You identify what features are good, what features need work. You make the changes you need to do. You add a little bit more content. So now you've taken your 30 cards for your card game. You add in another 10 cards. You test it. Is the game still fun? Is the game still worth playing? No. How can I fix it? If it's fun, then guess what? We add another 10 cards. We add another stage. We add another few monsters to the game. Because during this step, you're trying to continually change the game until it is a fun and entertaining experience. The fourth step is more revision. You can't play this enough. You can't test it enough. You just have to keep slowly working away at it to make a better game. The fifth stage of game design is something called polish. And you can't underestimate the importance of this final stage. And it's the difference between making a mediocre game and making a fantastic award-winning game. This final stage, it has to do with taking everything that you have so far and getting rid of the rough edges. This means instead of having a pretty close balance, you need to make sure that the difficulty curve is just right. You need to make sure that the tutorial is effective enough to teach the player, but not be too long to, bore them. And you also have to make sure that the graphics and the animation and the acting or the voice acting or the rules, everything works just right. This will be the difference between a good game and a bad one. You've gone through all the stages to get to this point. You have an amazing game and you've accomplished something that very few people will ever do. This is something to be proud of regardless of the review scores, regardless of the number of sales. You should be proud of everything you've accomplished.